here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week, it's going to be the turn of Alex Newport, who I spoke to very recently about life, love, poetry and all the other groovy stuff. Was in the Nottingham-based band Fudge Tunnel during the 90s and is now living in Joshua Tree, America, with a recording studio that you'll find out about in this fascinating interview. So after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject of the early formative years. Alex, it's over to you.
Well, I think there was two. The original one, you know, I was born in 1970, so punk rock, which I would have loved to experience firsthand, but I was 6-7 years old, you know,
Yes.
and I sort of knew about it or knew what it was, but I was more interested in playing with toys at 6 years old. And, you know, so by then, so round about 9 or 10 years old, I remember my cousin had a Black Sabbath album and Iron Maiden, the first Maiden album. And hearing those just really just blew my mind, like, wow, okay, this is incredible. And especially to a 9 or 10-year-old boy,
Yes.
perfect. And then, so I started collecting records a little bit, and then I started branching out. What else is out there? Because I know, you know, those records are already 10 years old by that point. At least the Black Sabbath was. And so I started looking, well, what's out there at the moment? And I didn't have too many friends who knew much about music, but just a couple who were maybe in sixth form. And I remember one chap saying, oh, you should check out Gang of Four. You might like them, Gang of Four. So I was like, oh, it's a weird name, but yeah, I'll have a listen. And Psychedelic Furs. And really it was those that really opened up my musical understanding, you know. For me, it felt such a huge stretch from Sabbath and Maiden into something much more accomplished and that maybe had more political ideas in it as well, especially Gang of Four.
Yes.
And then it just branched out into everything that was going on at the time. Killing Joke, Sisters of Mercy. I even am a huge Alien Sex Fiend fan. I was about to say anything that could be termed goth, but I actually never really Fields of the Nephilim. I never really dug them very much. I always thought that they were a bit of an imitation band. So the cream of the crop, goth and what we would now call post-punk, I suppose.
Right, that period actually. So you'd have been 16 in like 1986, wouldn't you? So were you sort of, was that whole political red wedge kind of Thatcherism, was that sort of on your radar at that stage in life? Because also I think that was Chernobyl in 1986, I believe.
Right, I think you're right. Yeah, 86.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. You know, that the politics was I was sort of becoming aware of it. But at the same time, you know, I'm 16, like you're still sort of trying to figure out what the hell you're doing or, you know, how you're going to eat. You know, I just left home at 16. So I was literally on my own, like figuring out I need to get a job, I need to eat somehow. And so a lot of the political stuff didn't resonate with me until a bit later, maybe 2021.
Yes.
So what's that? You know, around very early 90s.
90s, yeah. So did you, at that stage, were you brought up in Nottingham then? Was that your hometown?
No, I was born in Wolverhampton.
Right.
And then my family moved to Stoke-on-Trent, so sort of out of the frying pan into the fire.
Yes.
Yeah. So, you know, it's that area, at least around that time, my teenage years, it wasn't very connected musically. There really wasn't very many gigs at all, you know. And so I always sort of had this in my head, I wish I'd been born in London. Why wasn't I raised in London? But, you know, at the same time, I do have to say that looking back on it, it's growing up in that area did help me to become who I am
Yes, well, quite.
Yeah. So it's okay. But there really wasn't too many people into music at school. My friend Chris introduced me to Echo and the Bunnymen, and I think probably the Smiths as well around that same time.
So what was your first gig you went to?
The first gig I went to was the Psychedelic Furs at Leicester de Montfort.
Right. And they must have done Pretty in Pink by then, so they must have been quite a big...
Oh, wait, I'm so sorry. That was the second gig. The first gig was Simple Minds during... they opened with Waterfront, so it would have been Sparkling in the Rain.
Right.
85, 86.
God, you would have gone through the Brat Pack films, wouldn't you, at that stage as well?
Yeah, totally, yeah.
So did you actually embrace that? Because you were still a young teen at that stage, a very young teen. So were they on your radar, the Breakfast Club and St. Elmo's Fire?
Absolutely not, no. It wasn't my thing at the time.
Right. So when you came out of leaving home and leaving school at 16, which is incredibly young when you meet a 16-year-old now, they're tiny, aren't they? I mean, how did you navigate that next part of your life? Did you go on the dole?
Yeah, well, it was a bit rough. Yeah, it definitely was a bit rough. And I ended up in Nottingham, and I went to college in Nottingham, which, I did meet some good mates there, and I did enjoy it. But I also sort of felt like there's still really not much going on in Nottingham. The early 90s, like the rave scene that's where it was at. And then wasn't my thing at all. I didn't have anything against it. It just wasn't my.
Yes.
It wasn't. And so it was a bit rough. And then at some point I was like, well, I just need to start a band and play my own music then,
Had you started playing guitar at that stage?
I had, yeah, but I wasn't particularly good. But, but I was young enough to remember punk rock somewhat, where I was like, I don't need to be that good. And, most guitar I learned by playing along to either Black Sabbath or Gang of Four records. And,
right.
Gang of Four and Andy Gill half the time is playing one note. It's just, but I just really love, like, wait, he's playing one note, but it's how he attacks that note that makes it really special, So I sort of thought, well, I can do that. Let me do something like that. Just keep it simple.
Yes. And did you, at that stage in the late 80s, did you go and see any bands like My Bloody Valentine at that point?
I did go to see a lot of bands around that time. I'm not sure if I saw My Bloody Valentine, but probably. There was University of Nottingham had a lot of gigs on all the time. So we would see a lot of the American bands like Sonic Youth and Mudhoney, even Nirvana when they first came over and no one knew who they were.
So were they supporting Tad on that particular tour?
Yeah, Tad, exactly, yeah. And I distinctly remember, I was very excited about Nirvana because I'd already got one of the first 7-inches they put out and thought it was incredible. And so I was very excited, and they were terrible. And I remember Tad just blew them away completely on every possible level. And Nirvana even apologized for how bad they were and sort of walked off stage, tail between their legs, And then Tad came on and it was like, brilliant. Now this guy's really great.
Because I remember John Peel had been playing that compilation Sub Pop 100, which I remember that's where
yeah.
So I got the Bleach album and went to see them at the Norwich Arts Centre, but I can't remember much else. But yeah, I saw Sonic Youth at that stage as well. And there's the Butthole Surfers a bit.
Oh, yeah, Butthole Surfers.
And before that were bands like Husker Du as well, which I was obsessed with at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't, maybe I was slightly too young and I missed Husker Du a little bit. But my jam was Dinosaur Jr. Like anytime Dinosaur Jr. would come over, I would absolutely do anything to go see them. They were one of my favourite bands, still are.
Yes, they were good. So then how did you manage to sort of form a band? How did that sort of come about? Did you sort of put an advert in a paper?
The old classic, yeah. I put an advert in Selectadisc in Nottingham. Sadly, R.I.P. Selectadisc.
Yes.
but that was, that's what I mean. I had some horrible job, and I'd spend most of my time at this job, and then all Saturday usually I'd be in Selectedist, buying anything that was on Sub Pop or Alternative Tentacles. Or do you remember those days when you used to like you would buy something based on the cover art or the name of the
yes,
or even what label it was. I mean, there was definitely a point for us where pretty much anything, if it's on Sub Pop, chances are you're going to like it. So
yes. Well, I think 4AD had a moment like that, and SST Records. So that was also another one.
Back in those days.
Yeah, yes, definitely. Well, there was a lot of identity, wasn't there? There was a lot of kind of investing in a scene and sort of being part of, feeling like that was your thing, your jam, I suppose. So
right. Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, we put implicit trust in those labels. Anything that was on Sub Pop, Matador, Alternative Tentacles, like, I'm going to spend my money. I know it's going to be good. It's, I trust these people.
Well,
It was literally an advert in Selectedist. And I think it said something like, guitarist looking to form band with the sound of the 3 Bs. And then a bit further down, it said Big Black, Black Sabbath. Wait, did I say Big Black? Black Flag.
Black Flag.
Big Black, Black Sabbath, Black Flag, the 3 Bs.
Right. And that was it. My God, there you go. I know. Well, my brother was older than me, about 7 years, and he was into prog rock, but he did have a Black Sabbath compilation and Deep Purple. And then he also had Richie Blackmore's Rainbow, which when you're Rainbow. 15 or 16, they were just epic anthemic songs, really. And
totally.
And
it's so funny, when we discover that sort of stuff when you're pretty young. I mean, I remember listening to that, something like Rainbow, and thinking, God, it's so heavy, it's so intense, And it could, like, if I listen to it now, I probably still like it, but it's hardly extreme,
No, it's not.
But to the young, impressionable teenager, they felt pretty. And for me, it was coming from nothing. I had no other reference, really,
No,
so they did make a big impact in that way.
Yes, Richie was good on his power chords, wasn't he? Kill the King. And then he had the big hit with Since You've Been Gone, which was a bit confusing, but strangely addictive. So that was good. Poor Graham. He didn't get much money for being a vocalist on Rainbow, did he? But it was actually Motorhead was the band that I've just stuck with ever since, because I just think they just tick the box. They just are just everything. Even the last couple of albums they did, I thought were just stunning. They had a great producer.
Yeah, I agree. Motorhead and Sabbath. I can listen to almost any.
It was they just don't age at all. I just think they were perfection, really, in some of those moments. So Adrian and David came along and said, yes, we want to be part of the band.
Right, yeah, that was it. I think we did audition a couple of different players before Dave. And at that stage, we had no idea, do we want 2 guitars? Do we want keyboards? We had no idea what we were doing. And so, there's a couple of people that wanted to do second guitar, but then I just sort of felt like, 2 guitarists just sounds like such a mess. And I was thinking of, the classic power trio. Let's just get a bass player. And that's all we need. Dave came along at the right exact time, fit perfectly. And, it was interesting. We definitely had a lot of different influences. And so trying to sort of work them all in. And when you start a band, for me, it's always that thing. It's like you've got to give it at least a year to figure out, well, what do we even want to sound like? Or what are we good at, And so there's that process of writing songs, trying stuff, and then sort of finally realizing, that's not really the direction we want. And then slowly over time, you hit on a few things. In my case, it was like buying more distortion pedals until finally we were like, that's it, let's do that. What we really wanted to do is sound like Dinosaur Jr.
Right.
But none of us, and in particular myself, just not good enough musicians to do that, And so I felt like, okay, I need to simplify this a little bit. Plus, I I was a huge fan of all the volume and all the noise of Dinosaur Jr., and so I was like, let's just go that direction. That seems like the funniest and quickest way to get a band going.
Because at that point, there was also the scene of Napalm Death and Extreme Noise Terror and Carcass and those bands. Did they come on your radar as well at that point? Those kind of...
Yeah, but I never liked any of that stuff. I mean, that all that stuff felt like overly caveman to me. I don't know.
I just remember just going to see them. That was the only time I saw John Peel, was one of those gigs.
Oh, right.
in Ipswich. And I don't know, because it was kind of weird how the 80s finished. There was the sort of scene that was definitely about, for me, I suppose, the indie pop world. But things by the late 80s, you could feel that something had completely changed. And then ecstasy came along, didn't it? And there was a whole dance scene, but then you had the grunge scene. And then in the UK, it was a little bit, any band around that time, I think, just had a bit of an awkwardness because there was no, I don't know, a few bands like the Sundays came along, or Carter, the Unstoppable Sex Machine, but you sort of didn't really know where it was going. It took a few years before there was then an idea of what the 90s were going to sound like a bit.
Yeah. And it's surprising, sort of how quickly all that goes as well, because, we just covered 6 or 7 radically different types of music in, a 7-8 year period, from the mid-80s up to the early, might say, 92. There's so many changes so quickly.
Yes. So when you were sort of getting the sound and the sort of the general noise of the band together, did you get a rehearsal space? Where were you sort of practicing at this point?
Yeah, we had a classic space. It was in the Nottingham Working Men's Club, and I think pretty clearly they hated us, but we were bringing in some extra money for them, and they didn't have to do very much.
Right.
So that was fun. That's where we started off. That's where we sort of got our big start there, and then eventually, I think, I don't even remember if at that time if there was even like practice rooms in Nottingham, like legit proper practice rooms. I want to say that there wasn't, but then a couple of years after that, around about 1990, maybe that's when you started to notice, there's a recording studio in Nottingham now, and there's a rehearsal room, like a legit proper one with like a drinks machine and like proper soundproofing and a proper sound system. So that's probably 89, 90.
Yes. So your first EP came out, Sex Mammoth. So this is a full track EP, wasn't it, really? Were these the first 4 songs that you sort of managed to sort of perfect at this stage?
Yeah, pretty much. There was a few very early ones that got tossed because they didn't seem to fit what would become. And so those were the first 4 like legit songs. So it's 4 songs on a 7-inch. And even the band name, around that time, we didn't have a band name, and we were sort of struggling, and we did have a demo, and we were sending that out to labels, but like, wait, we need to put a name on the cassette here. And so Adrian, the drummer, came up. He was a huge fan of Wise Blood, which is basically J.G. Thirlwell and Rolly Mosselman had this project called Wise Blood, and they had this song called The Fudge Punch. And Adrian also loved this band I think they were from Detroit, and they were called Sponge Tunnel. And so he's just like, put these 2 together, Fudge Tunnel. And I was like, oh my God, that is hilarious. That's so funny. Of course, we're not actually going to call the band that. That's ridiculous. But just stick it on the tape for now. So we just, we've got to have some name for now. And we sent that tape out to a few labels. One of them was Vinyl Solution in London. And Rob Tennant at Vinyl Solution immediately rang us, said, "This is brilliant. I want to put out your record." And we were like, "Hey, fantastic. But we just need to change the name." And he was like, no, don't change the name. The name's perfect for that music. It's brilliant. And that was it.
You were there. You were there. Yes. They've
I mean,
no.
slight regret in that, but you know, it doesn't really matter.
No, I guess not. But then John Peel must have picked up on it pretty quickly because this is
Pretty quickly,
89.
yes. Yeah, so it was, you know, we had that sort of classic trajectory for 10 minutes, you know, single of the week in Sound, single of the week in NME, played on Peel. Yeah, it was really exciting. But
Yes.
at the same time, it was very difficult for us to get gigs at that time because we were doing this thing that was, we basically were a punk rock band, but we had this very big, heavy guitar tone. And so it was somewhat close to old school metal like Black Sabbath in that way. So when we went to book gigs, it was sort of, you know, people were like, well, what is this? It's too slow for punk. And it's not metal because there's no solos or anything, or, you know, metal-y vocals. So I don't know what to do with this. And it was actually really hard to get gigs. It sounds ridiculous now, but at the time I remember it was really hard. They would put us on with metal bands and their fans hated us. And they would put us on punk shows and they all thought we were way too slow and heavy. And so it wasn't until about 1990, end of 1990, going into 91, that this word came up on everybody's lips, which was grunge. And everybody suddenly started talking, oh, there's all these bands coming from America and they're sort of doing this heavy, punky, weird thing. And suddenly everybody just turned to us and said, oh, you're a grunge band. And we were like, all right, whatever. If that makes it easier to get gigs, then yeah, sure, we'll do it, you know.
Yes, that was very handy. And have you got any memories of the John Peel session at the Maid Vale studio with the famous Dale Griffin from Mott the Hoople fan?
Yeah. Highlight of my life. Absolutely. I mean, you know, it's 3 kids from Nottingham. You know, we barely spent much time in London at that point, just a few gigs, and, you know, to go, and we barely spent any time in studio. So to go into what's one of the UK, if not the world's finest studios, the Maid Vale studios are incredible. And, you know, I was like a kid in a candy shop. It was just incredible. And I remember it's this huge, huge room because that's where they record a lot of orchestras, right? This is a massive room. But what they do is they shove you all into one very tiny corner, you know, because they're like, well, we don't want all the sound of the room. That's not really for rock. So for rock, we're going to shove you right in the corner. And you're playing, looking out into this massive room. And, you know, Dale was absolutely brilliant. And at that time, I think I'd already started to get into recording and knew a little bit about studios and stuff, you know, and I remember saying Dale put some mic on my guitar and I said something like, oh, Dale, that mic, I never usually think that sounds good on my guitar. Is there anything else that we can use? Maybe I could suggest a mic that I like, that, you know. And he said, let's go get a coffee. Yeah, sure. Okay, so we went to the little BBC cafe and he sat down and he said, listen, it's my job to capture the live sound of a band doing their songs, and I've got 4 hours, top to bottom. And we've just wasted 20 minutes of it drinking this coffee. So what I do is I know which mics work for me quickly. I know where I can put the drums in the room that will sound good right away. And I just do that because I've only got a few hours. I need you to trust me on this and I'll make it sound good. And I was like, fantastic, brilliant, you know, yeah. And I really appreciated him explaining. He didn't get angry at me. He didn't say, you know what you're talking about, which he had every right. He just sat down and nicely explained to me. And so from then on, I was like, I'm just going to play and enjoy this. And he's going to be on, you know, the other side of the glass. And it was brilliant. It was fantastic. It was so much fun.
Yeah,
you know,
imagine.
And then, of course, even one step better is hearing it on the Peel show. Hearing John Peel announce our songs. I mean, it's just, you know, I've spent so many nights sitting in my room taping the John Peel show and, you know, knew his voice and his delivery so intimately and was so in awe of him, that to hear him announce and support a song that I'd been involved in, yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. Never forget that.
That must have been, yes, I know, hearing your name being spoken on the radio was, it must have.
Yeah,
so
on
after
the same radio show that I discovered so many bands that, I still love to this day.
Yes.
I mean, Peel was the first person playing any of that stuff, Sonic Youth, Nirvana, Mod Honey, all the Sub Pop stuff. It's the first time I heard Big Black. It was the first time I heard any of those kind of things, as well as a lot of the really cool techno stuff that he was playing as well, and African music and all sorts of stuff that I'd never been exposed to before.
Yes, this is where my love of the Bundu Boys came from, really, was John Peel.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also he played all the early rap music, which was, quite fascinating because at that time there was no history to it. So it was like, God, this is so unusual. So yeah, I just liked his show because it was just such a mix of totally different music. So, I would get quite bored if it was just indie pop, but when you sort of heard sort of Dennis Brown or Gregory Isaacs next to the Smiths or Sonic Youth, it was always quite interesting. And then sort of various Public Enemy tracks that he played from the first couple of albums. So
yes, it's incredible. There was nowhere else to hear that sort of stuff.
Yes, and also folk music.
Because he was on a Friday night, if I remember. It's like Friday night about 10 o'clock or 9 p.m. But, for a 21-year-old lad, like, I don't want to be in it. I'm single and I don't want to be sitting in on a Friday night by myself. But I got one of those tape recorders that would do the auto reverse. So it would record, all through one side and then turn it around and record on the other side. So I could basically get the entire show, give or take a few minutes maybe. So, Saturday morning, bit hungover, I come in and be like, oh, let's listen to Peel's show.
Yes, absolutely. So with that momentum then, did that sort of bring much more attention to the band for your first album?
It did, yeah. I mean, all that attention got us signed to, what we would quote unquote bigger label. We felt that our recordings were really rushed because there was so little money available, and that's not anybody's fault, but we felt like it'd be nice to have more than, a couple of hours in a studio, like to have some proper studio time. And so we were offered that by Earache Records, which, ultimately turned out that all three of us regretted that completely. I wish that we'd stayed with Pigboy and Vinyl Solution. But, signing to Earache, it did afford us that larger budget and put us in with a producer who was brilliant. And, I loved all that as well. But it made us, by association with Earache, it made us a metal band, which we weren't a metal band.
Right.
But all of a sudden, all those people at NME and Sounds and Melody Maker were like, we're not reviewing this. They're a metal band now. And we'd be like, no, same band. It's just a different label. And I mean, at the time, Earache was signing a lot of different stuff. They'd signed Godflesh, who we did really love. And they even signed a lot of these sort of techno bands like Depth Charge. And there was a rap band from London, a hip-hop band from London, whose name escapes me at the moment. But to us, at least, it felt like, okay, so it's not all just metal bands. You are signing you're trying to branch out a little bit. And therefore we would fit in this situation.
Yes.
But very, very good. That didn't really work out. Very quickly, a lot of those bands got dropped or, moved off the label. And so we were sort of left with all these other bands that we didn't really like. And they, specifically hated us because we're not true metal, unquote.
Yes.
So they would say that, you're not true metal. And we'd be like, no, we're not even metal at all. We never said that we were. We were a punk rock band.
Yes. Did you sign, was it a one album deal or did you have...
Of course it wasn't. It was a 3 album deal. And it also was a deal that back in those days, they used to do this thing called an upstream. You probably remember this. So if you're on a small indie label, but they have some connection with a major label, and so if you sell, let's say you sell more than 20,000 albums, okay, we're going to automatically upstream you. So now you're on Columbia Records. And, you know, so that's exactly what happened with us. So now you're on Columbia Records. We're dealing with A&R in New York who knew nothing about us. And that was dreadful. Yeah, it was absolutely dreadful. And we did a lot of touring in America and North America. And but, you know, it felt like it was moving more and more control was being had by this major label. And I don't necessarily have any problem with major labels. It's the creative freedom that I'm looking for. It is possible on a major label, but maybe around that time it would have been a lot more difficult to do. And so, you know, we were really being controlled by this label. It made everything really miserable. And I think at one point we realized, you know, chaps, this is just not fun anymore. This is becoming a chore.
Yes.
And we're part of this machine, right, where you have to spend a lot of money and make a video and get on MTV, and you have to do all this whole thing. And I think our thing was always like, no problem with being on MTV, no problem with making a video, any of that stuff. But what we don't want to do is compromise what we're doing. And we are being made to compromise. And so, you know, we would just resist, kick back. And then it turned into us deliberately sabotaging or, you know, not doing shows. And so that was the beginning of the end, really.
Yes. So how does, you know, when you sort of there with the band, you know, rehearsing, writing songs, how does a label then start to interfere with what you want to do? Do they listen to the tapes and say, no, you're going to have to do something different? How does their interference come into play?
Literally, it's a classic story. Like, you know, Columbia would say, let's hear your demo. Okay, here's our demo. And they'd say, yeah, no hits on this. We're not, you know, not hearing a hit. And we'd be like, right, so let's see. You signed us because you love the band, but you want us to change. And they said, yeah, no, it's not really like that. But we do want to change the name. And we were like, oh, for God's sake. I mean, it's already way too late for that now. Come on. That's ridiculous, you know?
Yes.
But the thing was like, okay, you want us to change our songs or go and write more commercial songs. Well, we're not even signed to your label, right? We're signed to Earache and we're distributed by Columbia. So you have no right to tell us what we should be doing with our songs whatsoever. And B, you're not even offering us any money. I mean, I would say the one advantage of a major label is usually they have a large check that they can cut, you know, and then at that point you have to decide, okay, will I compromise my art for that paycheck or will I not, you know? And I'm not going to argue the case for either, but you have to understand that's how it is, you know? And I think at that time we were like, I don't know what we would do if a check was offered, but a check wasn't even offered. It was like, you have to change your songs, write more commercial songs, but we're not offering you any money. And so we were like, what's the point then? So we basically sabotaged and did whatever we could until Columbia finally said, we don't want anything to do with this band. And we were like, great, we don't need it anyway.
Yes.
But the damage was already done.
Yeah,
you know?
well, quite. Well, when you did the debut album, Hate Songs in E minor,
yeah,
did you have much kind of outside influence during that one, or was it your follow-up that was difficult?
The first two, so Hate Songs and then Creep Diets was the second album. Neither of those had any outside influence, except a producer that we were working with. But
is that Colin Richardson?
Colin Richardson, yeah. Who's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. He was amazing. He taught me so much. But not from the label. There was no, we have to listen to your demos before we cut a check. There's none of that. They're just like, yeah, you've got songs going in the studio. You know what you're doing. Colin knows what he's doing. We're not worried about it. So it was after Creep Diets, which was more successful, especially in America. And so that's when Columbia really started to want to get involved heavily. And I'm surprised that we even managed to make an album after that, to be honest, because it was very popular at that point. But we did make a third album, but that third album is much more bitter. I feel like we lost our sense of humor a bit with the band. It's more aggressive. And, I think that really displays the frustration that we had with the whole music business at that time.
Yes, because you did a few covers, including one that Motorhead also covered, Cat Scratch Fever, didn't you? Was that a favourite of the band at that stage?
The idea behind that was that when we did Hate Songs, we wanted to make it special somehow. So we spent a lot of time on the artwork and making that really good. And then we thought, what if we include a free 7-inch that we could give away? So it'd really be a collector's item. If in 10 years' time people even care about this band, but there will be this sort of nice collector's item, with a 7-inch. But it was all very rushed. I think we didn't really have too many songs, and we were sort of like, let's just do a couple of quick covers, And Cat Scratch Fever, I don't know where that came from. Maybe it's one of my cousins had that song, or I don't know, it was in my head somehow. And one band practice, I just started playing it, and they were like, brilliant, let's do this. This will be really fun. Let's just do this.
Yeah.
But, as part of although it was just meant as a sort of throwaway free 7-inch. But when the album came out in the US and it came out on CD, so that was the time. Remember how I used to buy a CD and it'd always be like, well, this is the main album, but then we'll include, maybe we'll bundle, like an EP that the band did before, or some live songs or something, would be to bundle it all onto one CD. And so that's what they did. They bundled Cat Scratch Fever, which was never meant to be on the album.
Right.
And so, when we would come to America, people would be going, play Cat Scratch Fever, and we'd be like, what? We never even rehearsed it or even thought about. We haven't thought about it since the day we recorded it. What are you talking about? We didn't realize that, yes, it was bundled on the CD and people thought it was part of the album.
Right.
Which is a little inappropriate.
So were you getting quite a lot of traction in America during that period, in the sort of 91, 92? Were they sort of picking up on the band quite a lot?
Yeah, they were, because we did really well on college radio, which is a big thing in America, and so, also at that same time, you've got all these bands coming out that are maybe of a similar vein, right? The G word. So there was Smashing Pumpkins' first album, and Nirvana was coming up, Mudhoney. And so we kind of got lumped in with those bands. In fact, I remember going to San Francisco or maybe it was Seattle. I can't remember, but we were talking to fans and they said, oh God, are you English? We thought you were from Seattle.
Right.
So we were sort of lumped in with that whole sound. I mean, it seems a bit weird. It felt weird to us. So, we're not from Seattle. We're not even from this country. But whatever. Well, if it helps the band, sure. Yeah, whatever. We're a grunge band.
Were you headlining or sort of supporting most of the American shows?
I think it was a combination of both, and I think that was sort of how they did it. Maybe they still do it that way. You'd go out, do a headline show of smaller venues, but cool venues, and then hit college radio really hard about the same time. Then you come back a few months later supporting a bigger band, and then you would follow that up again with a smaller headline tour.
Right. So that was getting quite a lot of traction, really, wasn't it? Did you ever have a manager at this stage?
Yes, we had a manager. Yes, Martin was very good, a good friend of ours. He was really good. Yeah.
Yes.
But there wasn't any money coming in. But, so I felt bad for Martin that, the very difficult to pay his way, even though he was working so hard for us. We were in massive debt, and we still are to this day, because Columbia made us spend 30 grand on a music video. And, and we had these two mates, these Scottish guys, Tam and Dave, that were really into video stuff. And I mean, there wasn't too many people who knew how to do that. 1991, 1990. But that was their jam. That's, they would come to a lot of our gigs in London and video the gig and then sort of treat it and send it to us. And we'd be like, this is brilliant. These guys are geniuses. So when Columbia wanted to make a video, we were sort of like, we don't want to pay 30K to make a video. Tam and Dave could do it for 500 and it'll be brilliant. They're great. And, Columbia would be like, oh, no, it's got to be a known director. It's got to, and if we don't spend at least 30K on it, MTV won't play it, and we're sort of like, oh, this is so stupid.
Right.
So it's 30K of our money is what you're saying, basically.
My God.
And, but we caved, and so we did it. We got this guy, Dave Markey, that made videos for Sonic Youth. And, so, yeah, okay, sure, that is going to win us over. But 30K, it got played once by MTV at like 11 p.m. on like a Monday night. And that was it, and we're like, great, 30 grand on that. And because we were touring a lot in America, we needed tour support because you've got to fly over and rent a van and all, rent roadies and all that, a driver and all that stuff. So we got in so much debt that even though we sold what I think is a pretty good amount of records back in the day, it would be incredible these days, 60 to 80,000 albums.
Yes.
Which was, even in those days wasn't too bad. Not really quite enough for a major label. So, Columbia, it was under their threshold. But for an indie label, like, that's brilliant. But we've never seen any money from Fudge Tunnel because we're still in so much debt because of all those tours, the video, all that stuff.
There's an amazing amount of admin they keep. Because I remember, I think it was Jim Bob from Carter saying that, again, they owed millions. And, because I mentioned, do you ever get a royalty check? And he said, no, because I'm just still paying off this debt like a third world country that had been exploited by the imperial state, really.
Right, absolutely. There you go.
So did you eventually get presented with the spreadsheet and go, great, how's things looking? And then go, my God, you've remembered every receipt you've got there.
Yes, it did. It took quite a few years to get any sort of accounting done, but yes, we did finally get it. But it's not, the spreadsheet's not very big. It just simply says, US tour 1992, US tour 1993, 50 grand, MTV video, 30 grand. That's about it, That's already 100 grand right there.
Right, God. So even when you did your John Peel sessions, you didn't go, oh, great, we've been given, I don't know. I've known someone who once got £100. I think it was in the 80s. They were so delighted. You never saw any money from those either.
No, I don't think so, no. But we did, what was good is we were able to get the tapes back from the BBC ultimately and release those, which was a bit difficult dealing with BBC, as I remember. So it took a few years. But we were eventually able to get those. We did 2 Peel sessions, so they're all released on one album. Yeah,
the second one was in 92 with Mike Engels. Was that quite a different? Was that much different or?
Probably quite similar, but I think on the second one, so by this time we knew the score, right? We knew how everything was going to be. So it's probably a bit more fun because it was pretty easy. We treated Peel sessions as a way to demo songs for the album and just have a great fun time for an afternoon in London,
Yes. So when you would come to do that third album, which is this the one that you just had, you felt at that stage the band was kind of pretty much over when you were going to?
I knew the band was going to break up, and by that time I'd already moved to America, so things were starting to get quite difficult, and it's just everything just sort of started to not make too much sense anymore.
So that was 94. So did you then have a moment with the other two members of the band and sat down and say, did they also know it was over for them, or were they disappointed or surprised?
I think probably all of the above. They probably, I mean, we all were getting fed up. We'd been sort of chewed up and spat out by this American music machine, and the British one too. Come to that, think of it, and so I think it's like, well, who's going to make the first move? Who's going to leave first? And
is there much mechanics that have to happen to sort of walk away from a band? Do you have to sign anything, or is there any process that you have to go through?
No, I mean, we never worried about all that. We're mates, we never worried about any of that. But I mean, I think it depends who walks away from the band, right? If it's the front person, which in my case it was, that's pretty much going to be the end of it,
But do you have to tell the label and I don't know, do you have a bank account and you have to say, we're going to have to close that? Is there any, I'm always curious, what is the kind of, is there such a process like a divorce?
If there was a bank account, there wasn't much in it to worry about. We know that. So, I mean, I suppose, sort of we obviously told Martin, our manager, and I don't remember if we told the label or not. Probably not, because we hated them by this time. So we probably didn't even bother telling them.
No.
I'm sure they figured it out. But yeah, yes. I mean, it wasn't some huge breakup that was going to create a lot of news. It just sort of fizzled out, really. Yes. At that time, I was already transitioned into being a producer. So for me, it just made sense. This is like a pretty easy decision to make. In looking back on it years later, I do regret it a little bit. And because I do sort of feel like, well, maybe if we just took a bit of time off and recamped after 6 months or something, might have. I think that we still had a lot of potential, but yes. Whatever.
Yeah. So how did you manage to sort of make the move from Nottingham to New York? Was that quite straightforward?
Well, the first move that I made was to Arizona. It's fairly easy because I married an American girl. So,
right.
There was already, a family and a situation set up there to move into. Ultimately, that didn't work. We were very young. So it didn't work. And then I was sort of like stuck in America by myself. But at the same time, I was starting to produce a lot of other bands. And so I sort of felt like, well, I'll probably go back to England. But while this work is coming in, maybe I should stay here. And by this time, I'd moved to San Francisco. So I was like, okay, well, I'll stay here for, a year or something and just whatever. And that was 30 years ago.
So you went straight, because I think, is it Dave Newton from the Mighty Lemon Drops? I think he ended up in Chicago as a producer in his kind of garage, probably. And I think Chris Conley, who was in Ministry and the Finney Tribe, I think he had another similar experience of becoming a producer in America as well. So it's obviously it's another...
And Clint Mansell moved to LA. It would have been around that time, very early 90s.
Right. God. So did you build a studio then in New York? Did you set up a sort of recording studio in New York?
Well, for years I avoided having a recording studio. It's really a pain in the ass to have a studio. There's so much work involved. I mean, being a producer is hard. you're managing a team of people and working with people who, you know, are creative types and often need help. And so then, you know, having a studio to manage as well, I just felt like I don't want to deal with all that. Let somebody else deal with all that stuff, you know. But around the early 2000s, that's when we started to see, you know, the downloading and the streaming coming in, people stopping buying physical media, and therefore budgets just tumbling down. And so all of a sudden, everybody was like, if I don't have a studio of some sort, even just a bit of a room, I'm not going to be able to survive, you know, because budgets are so low. People could afford to pay a producer or a studio, but not both.
Right.
You know, so around that sort of time, I started thinking like, yeah, I'm going to have to start thinking about putting a room together. So I had a small room in LA. And at that time, I would still like, okay, maybe we go to like the big Hollywood studios and we'll do the basic tracks there. And then we'll camp out at my place and do all the overdubs and the mixing there. And then I moved to New York City, and budgets are still tumbling. And I'm like, I need a studio where you can literally do everything.
Right.
And that's how it's been since then. You know, I haven't been without a studio.
Blimey, God, that's quite a leap, isn't it? Really?
It's really is necessity. Like if you, you know, a lot of producers I know have a little studio in the backyard in their house, and you know, it's a bit cheaper to do it out here because now I'm out in the middle of the desert, and so you can get property cheaper than a major metropolitan area.
Right. So you're not in New York at the moment.
Absolutely not. No, I mean, have you ever heard of Joshua Tree?
Yes, God. Well, actually, there's a lot of interviews I've done with musicians around the Joshua Tree.
Really?
Yes. The guitarist from Generation X.
Really? What about Rich Good from the Psychedelic Furs? You know Rich?
No, God. Generation X. God, I'll tell you his name.
You should. Well, I'm not going to tell you who you should have on the show. That's not for me to say, but I'm putting his name out there for you. He's in Psychedelic Furs, and he's about 10 miles down the road from me. Lovely, lovely chap.
Oh, is he still in the band?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So there was, I think he's there, Bob Andrews.
Oh, Bob Andrews.
Who was there, and the woman Jeanette, who was in the Concrete Blondes, she was out there as well. And there's been quite a few where they're sort of sitting on their porch. And yes, and you know,
too bloody hot to be sitting on the porch this time.
Sort of trying to tell the birds to stop squawking in the background. But do you ever go to that other place, which is the cosmic kind of mind place, where you can kind of go? Oh, the Gong Bath at the Joshua Tree. Have you ever been there?
Oh, it's called the Integratron.
That's the one.
Yeah, it's the building. It's the building that the chap he built it from plans that were given to him by the alien.
The alien, absolutely, as you do. So have you? So have you also had a sort of? Do you get quite cosmic out in the Joshua Tree as well?
Well, it's not really my personality, but you know, my wife and I were living in LA, and we were sort of talking about moving out here because there's no way we could buy a house in LA. It's as expensive as London, if not more, you know. And so we started thinking, where can we afford to buy somewhere? I need to have a studio. And so we started looking at this desert in the Joshua Tree area. And we were sort of coming out here, and I think neither of us are particularly spiritual people. We're not anti, but we're just more sort of, I don't know, I'm a Brit. You know, it's I think you naturally have that sort of inbuilt thing against anything too spiritual. But I will say that we both started to comment as we spend more time in the desert. We both sort of comment like there is something a bit magical about it. You know, it is quite a special place.
Yes.
Sound baths. You know, I've got a couple of mates that do all that sort of stuff, and they invite me, and I usually just make some excuse not to do it. I don't know. Maybe I should try it. Maybe.
Well,
maybe
it's one of
really
our
fun.
favourite kind of road trips is to fly into Vegas and then get the rented car and either go to the Joshua Tree or Death Valley or the Grand Canyon or, just a national park. I just think national parks are stunning. And, there's something that always draws me back. And there's something about the big skies and sort of open
Yeah,
spaces.
absolutely. Well,
So,
I'm literally it's 1 mile to JT National Park from here. It's
right. My God,
literally
you must
5
get
minutes.
fed up with all the traffic though on some weekends, just parked up trying to get.
Yeah, it can be pretty bad on the weekends. But I mean, now that we're coming into summer, I mean, it's I don't 90 some, I don't know what that is in centigrade, but at least
Hot.
20, 29, 30.
You're in the
Yeah, it's
30s, aren't
bloody
you?
hot, basically. Yeah. So it's like I ain't going to the park for the next 4 or 5 months. There's no way.
So have you been to that venue called Harriet and Papa's or Papa and Harriet's?
Pappy and Harriet's, yes.
Yes, because I sort of get the regular emails with bands playing, and I think it does look like a nice little setup.
It's really, really fun. Yeah. They have the classic sort of desert character. It's like an old shack, with the old wood, and it looks really beautiful, and food there is not bad, and very small venue, but it sounds good in there, and it's just really, really fun. But they do now have they have the outdoor venue now as well, so they are having much bigger artists.
Yes, well, I think the wedding present were there recently, and Johnny Marr.
I think I believe that PJ Harvey is playing there soon, which I want to see. And in a couple of weeks is this band called Akshamal or Actionel. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're very, very eclectic and very interesting. And so I'm excited to go and see that.
Yes. So with your producing, you've done quite a lot of at the drive-in, the Mars Voltaire block party as well. So have you got a sort of quite a full diary of bands that you're producing all the time?
Usually, yes. I mean, I've been so fortunate in what I do that, it was definitely being in Fudge Tunnel, being in a band that was, that had some success, definitely helped sort of kickstart a career in producing. I mean, if I'd had to go and be a T-boy or clean toilets at studios, I would have done that. I had no problem with doing that. But that's not how it worked out. I just, from being in this band, it sort of catapulted me into, you're the guy from Fudge Tunnel. Don't you produce records? Yeah. Can you come and do ours?
Right.
So it just sort of one thing led to another. And I'm so grateful for that. And bands like At the Drive-In that really, I think I helped them with their career, but they certainly helped me with mine as well. That record did really, really well. And I mean, I still get work to this day. People say, I love it. I grew up listening to that album. I love it,
Yes.
So I'm in a great position where I do turn down things sometimes if I feel like I'm not the right person, the right fit for it, because producing it's hard. It's a lot of work, and you're really dedicating yourself to it. And from the artist's perspective, they're giving up a lot. They're giving up their trust. It's their baby, and they're handing it over to me and trusting me with it. It's a lot to ask from people. Yes. So if I don't feel like it's really a great situation, then it's probably best for me to pass, and there's somebody out there that can do a better job. And I'm so grateful that I'm able to do that. But it's like like anything in music, it's up and down, and you never really know what's going to happen.
Well, quite. Yes, because I've done quite a few interviews with producers, and it does sound quite hard work, and also sort of issues with the band. Sometimes things going personnel within the bands, having to sort out those kind of things. I mean, have you had?
You learn that very quickly, because when I started, I was like, producing. It's about putting mics on stuff, right, and working the tape machine and get a really nice sound recording. And that's like the least important part of it. I discovered really quickly it's managing people, and it's getting people to trust you so that you can get the best out of them. And, and there's various ways to do that. And everybody's different, Some of the artists that I work with, I can see that they need a bit of like a PE teacher approach, we're doing this and we're going to do it now, and get in there and get it done. Let's go,
Yeah.
And I don't mean to be mean to people, but it's like, but that's what they need. They respond to that and it works. Other artists, if I did that to them, that might not work out.
No, fine.
So you have to make a judgment pretty quickly as to what's going to work within each person in each band. Some people need more gentle encouragement, and so you have to figure that out pretty quickly to get the best out of people. Because what I'm trying to do is take what they're doing and really bring out the best in it and elevate it to sort of the next level that they might not have been able to achieve. So it is a lot of work. It's dedication.
Yes, because I did an interview with the producer from the 90s, an American one, who probably shaped the sound of the 90s. Is it Michael Beanhorn? Somebody who was...
Oh, yeah, I love Michael, yeah.
Right, and it was quite interesting because he when you said about getting the best, because I did say, you work with most of the bands for just one album, which is often their best album. He said, yes, it was a hard job. I, had to sort of tell them to go away and write better material. It was very tense, but he got the best out of them, but he would never get asked to do the second album. So
right.
I thought,
I'm not a stranger to that situation either. But I mean, the thing for me is like, everybody that comes in the studio, like, I hope that we're going to be mates. And most of the time that does happen. We stay mates for years and we stay in touch, and it's amazing. But that's not really the focus of what we're doing. My focus is to make an incredible album. And if that means not being mates with somebody, that's unfortunate, but that's what we're going to have to do.
Yes.
And yes, there are people that I've butted heads with, or that, had words, and, I just think, I'll try not to get it to that point, but sometimes it's absolutely necessary. It really is,
And how do you get on? What's the issues with drummers at the moment? Because I know quite a lot of producers, and the drummer and the click track has ended in horrendous issues. The drummers being sacked, getting a new drummer. It even happened with The Wedding Present on the album George Best, and obviously with Courtney Love and Hull, and that particular producer and the drummer who, ended up, writing a book and having a film made about her, Patty Shelmer. Because she couldn't keep the click track, she couldn't keep the beat, and then things got really messy, and he brought another drummer in, which was, there was a lot more to it than that. So how do you deal with those kind of situations?
It is fairly common in the defense of drummers. It's the most difficult instrument on the planet. It really is. You've got to coordinate 4 limbs, and it's not just about hitting the drums, it's how you hit the drums that bring the tone out of them. So a lot of people have fantastic time and they can play to a click track, but the drums just sound horrible because they don't know how to hit them properly and get the right tone out of them. So, when you find an incredible drummer, it's amazing. To me, the drums are the backbone of any album. And I always feel like if you have solid drums and the drums sound great, you can be sloppy with your guitars, you can be sloppy with your bass, it'll still sound great. And in fact, guitars should be a little bit sloppy, that's the way they are. But you want solid drums to base that on, right? It doesn't work the other way around. If you have like really tight guitar, perfect guitar, but sloppy drums, everything still just sounds bad. It just doesn't work that way. So you have to have those solid drums. They're the backbone of the album. And once you've got those, everything else goes so smoothly and so quickly because, you know, guitar comes in a little bit late or a little bit of fluff note. It doesn't matter. The whole vibe is all there coming from the drums and the band as a whole. That it really doesn't matter. So, you know, I understand that's why producers are so hard on drummers. And I definitely have had my moments.
Yes. Do you remember the great Trogs tape? You know, where?
Oh yeah. That's right.
Da 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 da. Yes, sprinkle some fairy dust on the fucking thing.
Yeah. So yeah, there you go. It just goes to show
So have you been in any other bands since, you know, being in America? Have you sort of, you know, because did you play with another band called Red Love?
Yes, that's right. That was Red Love was myself and Matt Tong from Block Party. So when I worked with Block Party and we got along famously, that was a great time. At the time, Kelly was living in New York. And also at that time, Matt Tong was living in New York. And I was also living in New York at that time. And so Kelly was off doing stuff. I think Kelly had a solo album and he was on tour. But Matt and I would get together and we just got along like house on fire. And I think at some point I was like, wouldn't it be fun if we, you know, we're both here. Why don't we do like a musical project? I don't know if I want to call it a band, but like, you know, let's just play some music and see what happens. And that was really, really fun. And we made an album. But I think because of both our commitments, it was really difficult to be able to do any shows or to continue with new material. It just became very, very difficult. And then I ended up moving to California again, and that effectively ended it.
Right.
But I have recently started a project with my friend Tori Wall. Tori is a singer, incredible singer with just an incredible voice and style, very unique style. And I've worked with Tori a couple of times as producer, but just recently we sort of hit on the idea of what if we do this as not producer and client or producer and artist? Let's break that down and let's just collaborate, the two of us. So it is sort of more like a band, right? Mm-hmm. So it's early days on that, but it's going really, really, really well. And I'm excited about it. But I did make it a bit difficult for myself. I felt like at my stage in life, this is probably the last band that I'm going to do, right? I mean, who knows for sure, but I just sort of feel like I'm busy as it is. I don't have too much time to be doing band stuff. So if I'm going to do it, I don't know how long I can sustain it. But if I'm going to do it, and this is probably one of the last things I'm going to do in terms of a band, I want to make it really, really unique and different. And I just, you know, it's my job as producer to discover new bands, right? So I like go on Instagram every day and, okay, let's see what comes up. And most of it, I can't say I'm that impressed. You know, there's a lot of stuff that comes up and I hear it and I go, this is good, I like this. But then after a while, I keep listening to it and I realize the reason I like it is because it sounds exactly like My Bloody Valentine.
Right.
Or it sounds exactly like Joy Division. Or it sounds you know, it's like, I'm not enjoying it because it's something new. It's something that's rehashed. And that's not bad in itself. I don't mean to disparage those bands. I've made a career of rehashing music too. But I just feel like if I'm going to do something, what's the point? I don't want to do a shoegaze band. I don't want to do a band that sounds like Phoebe Bridgers. As much as I love Phoebe Bridgers, like it's already been done. What's the point? And so I sort of set myself this challenge. I want to do something that's completely unique and different. And I don't want to say never been done before, but at least never been done in that way before. And So as I start working on it, I realized, fucking hell, that's really hard to do. Like I was talking to my mate Sasha, and I told him this concept that I want to do something that's never been done before. And he said, it's impossible. That's impossible. And I said, oh, no, it's dead easy. Actually, you can do something that's never been done before. It just won't be listenable. Right? Anybody could come up with something, I'm going to play, an F sharp for 12 minutes on a synthesizer. There you go. It's like, yeah, great. It's never been done before, but it's not good.
No.
Who wants to do that? So I'm now caught in this challenge of working with Tori and coming up with stuff that's unusual and different and unexpected, but you still want to listen to it, But Tori is incredible. It's basically, I'll do a bit of music. I'll just sort of do a bit of a sketch on guitar or keyboard or whatever. And I'll be like, there you go, Tori, check it out. I don't even know if it's any good, really. Just check it out. And she's like, okay, turn the mic on. And Tori goes in there and just lays this vocal on top of it. It's just, it just blows my mind how good it is. And all of a sudden, I'm like, wow, this piece of music suddenly took on a whole new life. So now I'm really inspired to go back into the music and finish the music side of it and really extend that into something special, So that's very exciting.
Well, absolutely. And then was it this decade you also put out a few compilations or collections from the band's, was it live material you put together as well? Did you release some live stuff from Fudge Tunnel?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
So Fudge Tunnel has, we are released from our contract, or it's just sort of expired at the moment. And so, but, it's the modern age. Who needs a label, right? I mean, you can put music online. So we have a Bandcamp page, and I think fairly recently discovered an old tape from some American tours and had no idea what was on it. And when we listened to it, we're like, it's actually pretty good quality. And so we're able to put that out as a live thing on Bandcamp.
Blimey, that's fantastic. So you got the Sloppy Noise Rock and Best of the Desk, Volume 1, live in Europe, 1993. So is there anything else in the archives that you're tempted to release?
Well, I'm not sure. There was, for the 30th anniversary or was it 25th anniversary of Hate Songs, Earache wanted to do a remaster and repackage Hate Songs vinyl. So we thought, fantastic, that's great. But unfortunately, we were not involved in it in any way. And they remastered the record and it sounds terrible. So anybody that's listening, don't buy it. It's terrible. And so we went back to Earache and we sort of said, I don't know what happened here, but it does not sound good. And if you're doing any future reissues, can you please involve us? Like, we're not going to be, we're not trying to control the situation. We just want to be involved and help out and make sure that it sounds as good as it can. That's all.
Yes.
So there's some talk about remastering the other two records, but it's been at least a year since I've heard anything about that, so I'm not sure. But they did a great job on the artwork. On Hate Songs, they inverted the artwork. So instead of it being black and white, it's white and black. And it actually looks really, really nice. And it's on orange vinyl, which looks really nice. But yes, unfortunately, it's a really terrible cut. And it does not sound good.
Oh, that's disappointing. God, all that work
so,
and then...
It's so disappointing, yeah.
I was going to say, do you still get sort of kind of new fans discovering the band and sort of, I was talking earlier about, before the interview, about sort of people writing their memoirs and exhibitions and films. Do you sort of find that there's people who have got a curiosity about that period of music that have sort of just discovered you for the first time?
Yeah, absolutely. I get emails and people on Instagram all the time. And I really appreciate it. It's hard for me to believe that something that was done 30 years ago, like people still appreciate it. It's really, really great. But, a lot of the emails will say, you need to reform and do, come and do tours. And, I just think like nothing could be further from where I'm at the moment, I mean, for one thing, I've moved on from that type of music, I did a long time ago. And, anything that's like very heavy or aggressive, it was when you're 19, 20 years old, it's brilliant, But, over the years, my palette just broadened so much more that I just feel like there just isn't room for anything like that. I don't feel that way, and I don't feel that way about music so much anymore that, that I would want to do that. It would be really disingenuous of me to go out and be playing these songs,
And it would probably be hard to remember how to play them, I would imagine.
Well, yes, there's that too. I mean, I'm sure you could figure it out. I'm sure I could figure it out. But it's just so far from where I want to be musically at the moment that it wouldn't make sense. So we've never seriously discussed any sort of reformation.
It would be weird. It would be. I think it's one thing for the Rolling Stones who have just never stopped, but I think for other bands, it's just like, oh, that's not a great
That's idea. It. I think if you never stop, that's one thing. Or, or even if you you get back together and record something new and then you're going to go out and tour in support of that, that makes sense. But just to come out and play songs that are 30 years old, that I wrote when I was 19 years old and angry and, it just seems silly to me.
Yeah.
I mean, when people ask about that time, it's like, it's literally more than half my life away now, It's every single, how all the cells in your body get replaced like one by one.
Yes, this is true.
So, and I feel like, literally they've been replaced like 8 times over since I am just a different person.
From that 16-year-old. Did your parents, were they amazed of your life's journey from 16 to where you are now?
Amazed, yeah, but not necessarily in a positive way all the time. I mean, my parents at first were not, as classic story, right? Not approving of the whole music thing, just felt like that's just for losers. That was, need to go and get a proper job. I mean, I just felt like I'm never going to have a proper job. I'm 56 years old and I don't have a proper job, and I couldn't be happier,
Well,
so, but it took quite a long time to win them over, I mean, my dad in particular was fiercely against it, and and I was like, well, guess what? I ain't living in your house, so it doesn't really matter what you think. And my dad would always be, when you're going to give up a stupid band, a waste of bloody time, And then around that time when we had that video that was on MTV, my dad was down the pub, and it was about that time in the early 90s that they started having those big, massive TVs in pubs so you could watch the match. And he was down the pub one night and they had MTV on. And one of my dad's mates says, "Hey, John, is your lad, is he still doing that band? Is he still doing the music?" And my dad said, "Yeah, bloody waste of time, never get anywhere with that." And his mate said, "I don't know about that. He's actually on telly right now." And since then, so I think that for my dad, that legitimized it.
Wow.
Like, wow, you're on telly now. I can relate to that. That makes sense to me, and
God, that's amazing timing, Jesus.
Yes, wow. It really was. So since then, my dad became more supportive, and he passed away a couple of years ago. And when I was going through his stuff, I found he had a huge collection of like cutouts, reviews, all sorts of stuff about the band that I'd never even had or never even seen before, So he was ultimately supportive, but certainly not at first.
Crikey, how weird. That must have been a very strange feeling to think that he'd made those yes, archives of your musical moment.
Right. Yeah, but he was actually very proud of it,
Oh,
ultimately.
that's nice.
Yeah, it is. It makes me feel really good that he came round. I still think both of my parents is probably not what they would have, not the life they would have chosen if they could have chosen. But from age 16, I just said, you don't get to choose. When you have kids till they're age 16 or until they leave home, yes, you control them, and kids have to do what you're saying. But really, you have to understand that a kid is a different person, right? It's not you. It might be an extension of you, or
Yes.
but it's not you. So you can't put what you want on those kids, Well, you can, but it won't work.
It won't work at all. No. God.
So I don't that made me, that whole thing, I think, made me sort of a bit rebellious, and getting into playing this very aggressive music, was probably all a part of it.
Yeah.
But even at that time, like even in Fudge Tunnel, like you'd still listen to lots of different stuff. In the van, we'd be listening to REM and all kinds of different stuff that was the Beastie Boys and all whatever came out that was interesting. It's not like we would never be like, oh, let's put on something really heavy. That just wasn't our thing. XTC we would listen to a hell of a lot because we all loved XTC. And tons of stuff.
Yes. And how's your hearing, by the way?
I'm sorry, what? No,
did you manage to save your hearing a bit?
Fortunately, because even from the very early days of the band, I knew, I've got this feeling that I might be wanting to work on the studio side of things. I already knew, because I wasn't a big fan of touring at all. I'm a bit of a homebody, so I like having my stuff to mess around with. I don't want to be like sleeping in a van, Even when it was okay when I was 22, but I already could tell, like, I'm probably going to need to move beyond that a little bit. So I already knew that I probably wanted to be working in studios a lot, and so immediately I was like, I'm going to start wearing earplugs all the time, and it was terrible, and mates would make fun of me, but I was like, I'm not going to go without, and I'm not, my uncle worked in a factory and for years, and he got tinnitus pretty bad, and I know it was horrible for him. So
yes.
I always remember thinking, like, I need to be really careful. And I mean, Fudge Tunnel was a loud band. It was one of our singular aims, was to be as loud as humanly possible. So I was aware that earplugs were a definite must. So it's pretty good. Men, as we age, we do start to get a little bit of a loss at the top, but I do tests every few months just to see where it's at, and it's pretty okay at the moment.
Good. Well, God, that's very good to know, isn't it? Yes, I know. Yeah. Anything like hearing, teeth, and anything else, you just think, Jesus, you've got to look after them.
Right, exactly.
They're expensive if things go wrong, but that's life. Well, look, Alex, thank you ever so much for this interview.
The thanks is all to you. I really appreciate you reaching out to me.
No, well, that was amazing. And it's been brilliant. And thank you for your time. And yes, so pleased that you're at the Joshua Tree, actually, sort of enjoying that while we're just having unsettled weather. I think that's what you call it in the UK in the summer, unsettled.
Yeah, I do. I hear about it from my mom, time to time. But, if you, next time you're planning on coming to Joshua Tree, please let me know.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to come to this country at this particular point in time. Maybe.
Who knows? Oh God, you got the World Cup in 5 days' time, haven't you? 3.
It's going to be a disaster. I mean, it's literally just living under a disaster. That's what it is. It's really shocking.
Yes, I know. It makes you yes, I suppose that's how you can reminisce about the 80s wasn't that brilliant, but then you think, actually, it wasn't that bad now. I wish we hadn't moaned about it so much.
Suddenly, in comparison, it doesn't look that bad.
No, it's freaky. I know. Anyway, 2 more years. Anyway, look, thank you ever so much, and I'll keep in touch. But thank you, Alex. Take care. See you later.
You too. See you soon.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
And that was me in conversation with Alex Newport talking about his life in music. This has been the C86 show, David Eastaugh. Have a great week. Stay safe.